Every year, thousands of drivers vanish on American roads without explanation. No crashes, no bodies, just empty cars with engines still running and headlights cutting through the darkness. Tonight, we're diving into 13 highways, backroads, and forgotten stretches of asphalt where the impossible happens. Roads where GPS signals die, where time stops making sense, and where something waits in the fog, the desert heat, or the mountain snow. Some victims were found miles away with no memory of how they got there. Others were never found at all. Their vehicles tell stories their mouths never could. Before you start this video, check your doors are locked, because by the end you'll think twice before taking that shortcut home. This is Verified Souls, and these are the roads where drivers disappear. Let's begin with story number 1. Have you ever driven the same stretch of road over and over, watching your gas tank empty while the exit you're searching for never appears? I've been a long-haul trucker for 17 years. I've driven through every kind of weather, every time of day, across every state in this country. I know Highway 375 in Nevada like the back of my hand, that desolate stretch they call the extraterrestrial highway, running past Area 51 through nothing but sagebrush and empty desert. I've made that run at least twice a month for the past decade, hauling freight from Las Vegas up to Tonopah. It's monotonous, sure, but it's reliable. The kind of route where you can put the cruise control on, let your mind wander, and just watch the mile markers tick by. That night in September, I was running behind schedule. A delayed pickup in Vegas meant I was starting the drive at 10 p.m. instead of 6. Not ideal, but not a disaster either. The road would be empty, I'd make good time, and I'd still hit my delivery window by morning. I filled up at the last gas station before the long stretch, grabbed a coffee, and headed out into the darkness. The desert at night has this particular quality to it. The sky opens up so wide and black that the stars look close enough to touch. Your headlights carve out this little bubble of reality, and beyond that there's just nothing. Miles and miles of nothing. I was about 40 minutes in when I first noticed something off. There's this bend in the road, a gentle curve to the left around a small hill formation. I know that curve. It comes right after mile marker 42, except I swore I'd already passed it. I checked my odometer, did the mental math. Yeah, I should have been well past that section by now, but there it was again, that same curve, that same hill catching my headlights in that same exact way. I shook my head, blamed the coffee for being too weak, or my brain for being too tired. Long-haul driving does that sometimes. The monotony plays tricks on your perception. But then I passed mile marker 42 again. I saw it clearly in my headlights, that white reflective rectangle with the black numbers. My hands tightened on the wheel. That wasn't right. That was impossible. I checked my speedometer. 70 miles per hour, steady. I checked my odometer. The numbers were climbing like they should, but the road, the landmarks, they were repeating. That same curve, that same hill, that same mile marker, over and over. The radio had been playing classic rock, some station out of Vegas that usually faded to static about halfway through this stretch. But it wasn't fading. It was playing the same song. Not just the same song, but the exact same part of the same song. The guitar solo in Hotel California that starts about 3 minutes in. I heard it loop back to the beginning of that solo 4 times before I reached for the dial and switched it off. The silence that followed was worse. All I could hear was my engine, my tires on asphalt, and my own breathing getting faster. I'd been on this road for what felt like 2 hours, but my dashboard clock still read 10:47 p.m., the same time it had been when I'd first noticed the repeating curve. I grabbed my phone. 10:47. I watched the seconds tick. 10:47:23, 10:47:24, 10:47:25, but the numbers felt wrong, like they were moving through syrup. I tried calling dispatch. No signal. That wasn't unusual out here. The desert swallows cell service like it swallows everything else. But the no signal icon on my phone was flickering in a way I'd never seen before, blinking on and off in a rapid pattern that almost looked deliberate. The worst part was the absence of other cars. On a normal night, even late, I'd see a few sets of headlights. Other truckers, maybe some tourists who didn't know better than to drive this stretch after dark. But tonight, nothing. Just me and this impossible loop of highway, and the growing certainty that something was very, very wrong. My fuel gauge caught my attention next. 3/4 full when I'd noticed the loop. Now it read half, then a quarter. I was burning through gas but going nowhere, trapped in some kind of geographic glitch that shouldn't exist. I tried slowing down, thinking maybe speed was part of whatever was happening. 50 miles per hour, same loop. 40, same curve, same hill, same mile marker. 42. I tried speeding up, pushing 80, then 90. The truck shuddered, my cargo shifted, but the scenery didn't change. Just that endless repetition, like a video game level that hadn't loaded properly. Except this was real. The vibration of the steering wheel was real. The sweat soaking through my shirt was real. The empty fuel tank warning light that suddenly blazed red on my dashboard was real. That's when I saw the other trucks. They appeared on the shoulder, one at a time as I passed, big rigs like mine, parked at odd angles, some with their lights still on, some dark and abandoned looking. I recognized a few of the company logos. Outfits I knew, trucks I might have seen at way stations or truck stops. But they were empty, all of them. Doors hanging open, cargo containers sealed, no drivers anywhere. I counted 6 of them before I stopped counting, before the reality of what I was seeing really sank in. I decided to stop. Maybe that was the answer. Maybe the loop would break if I just pulled over and waited it out. I eased my truck onto the shoulder, right before that curve I'd driven past dozens of times. The gravel crunched under my tires. I put it in park, killed the engine. The silence rushed in like water, complete and suffocating. I sat there for what might have been 5 minutes or 50, watching my breath fog in the sudden cold. The desert gets cold at night, but this was different. This was the kind of cold that comes from deep underground, from places that never see sun. When I tried to restart the engine, nothing happened. Not a click, not a sputter. Dead. The battery shouldn't have been dead. Everything had been running fine, but now my truck was as lifeless as all those others I'd passed on the shoulder. I grabbed my flashlight, checked my phone one more time. Still 10:47. Still no signal. The flashlight beam looked thin and weak against the darkness pressing in around the truck. I knew I should stay inside, wait for dawn, wait for someone to come along. But something in me rejected that idea completely. Some instinct screaming that staying still was the worst thing I could do. I opened the door and stepped out onto the gravel. The air smelled wrong. Not like desert sage and dust, but like ozone and something else. Something sharp and metallic that made my eyes water. My boots hit the ground and I turned to check my load to make sure the cargo container was still secure. That's when I realized my truck wasn't where I'd parked it. I'd taken maybe 3 steps away from the driver's side door, but when I turned around, the truck was gone. Not driven away, just gone. Like it had never been there. My flashlight swept across empty highway, empty shoulder, empty desert stretching away into nothing. The road beneath my feet felt solid enough, but when I looked down, I couldn't quite focus on it. The asphalt seemed to shimmer and blur at the edges of my vision. I was standing in the middle of Highway 375, surrounded by darkness so complete that my flashlight barely made a dent in it. No truck, no other vehicles, no sound except a rising wind that didn't move the sagebrush. I started walking, following the white line at the road's edge, trying to keep my breathing steady, trying not to think about how far I was from anywhere or anyone. The mile markers had stopped making sense. I passed one that read 42, then 67, then 13, then 42 again. Numbers scattered like playing cards, meaningless and random. I don't know how long I walked. Time had stopped functioning in any way I understood. My phone still said 10:47. My watch had stopped completely. the second hand frozen between 12 and 1. But my legs were getting tired, my throat was getting dry, and the cold was seeping deeper into my bones. Eventually, I saw lights ahead. Real lights, not the phantom glow I'd been chasing. A truck stop. The familiar green and yellow sign of a place I knew, a place that shouldn't have been anywhere near this stretch of road, but there it was, solid and real and impossible. I stumbled into the parking lot, barely feeling my legs anymore. There were trucks parked there, lights on in the building, everything normal and ordinary and wrong in its rightness. A state trooper was parked near the entrance. When he saw me, he got out of his car fast, hand on his radio. I must have looked like hell. I tried to explain, but the words came out jumbled. Highway 375, the loop, my truck, gone. He called it in, got me wrapped in a blanket, drove me to a hospital in Tonopah. They checked me over, said I was dehydrated and hypothermic, but otherwise fine. The trooper told me they'd found my truck 3 weeks later, parked on the shoulder of Highway 375, right around mile marker 42, 3 weeks. I'd been missing for 3 weeks, but to me, it had been one night, one impossible, looping, endless night. The truck was exactly as I'd left it, except the engine was cold, and the logbook showed I'd arrived at my delivery point on time. Someone had driven that truck, unloaded that cargo, completed my route. The signature on the delivery confirmation looked like mine, but wasn't quite right. Just close enough to pass. I never drove that stretch of highway again. I quit long-haul trucking entirely. Couldn't stomach the thought of being out there in the empty places where the roads don't always go where they're supposed to. Sometimes, late at night, I still check my phone, and for just a second, I swear it reads 10:47. What if the fog rolling across your windshield wasn't weather at all, but something alive that wanted you to stop? I'm a landscape photographer. I chase light for a living, which means I'm always up before dawn, always driving to remote locations, always alone with my camera and my thoughts. The Blue Ridge Parkway in late October is one of my favorite spots. The fall colors peak at different elevations throughout the month, and if you time it right, you can catch those perfect mornings when the fog sits in the valleys like spilled milk and the sun breaks through in shafts of gold. I'd driven that route dozens of times, knew every overlook, every tunnel, every sharp curve that made tourists slow to a crawl. This particular morning, I was heading to an overlook near Mount Pisgah, trying to catch the sunrise at around 4,500 feet elevation, where the colors would be at their best. I left my hotel in Asheville at 4:30 in the morning. The parking lot was empty, the streets were dead, and I had that pleasant buzz of anticipation that comes with knowing you're about to capture something beautiful. The temperature had dropped overnight, down into the 30s. Perfect conditions for that dramatic mountain fog that photographs so well. I merged onto the parkway, my headlights cutting through darkness so complete it felt solid. No other cars, no houses, just me and 469 miles of winding mountain road that threads through wilderness like a ribbon. The fog started about 20 minutes in. At first, it was just wisps, those delicate threads that drift across the road and vanish in your headlights. Normal, expected, beautiful even. But it thickened fast, faster than any fog I'd seen before. Within 5 minutes, I'd gone from clear visibility to maybe 10 feet. I slowed down, flipped on my hazards, leaned forward in my seat to peer through the windshield. The fog had that heavy solid quality that makes you feel like you're driving underwater. I'd been in fog like this before, though. You just take it slow, watch for the white line at the road's edge, and wait for it to clear. Except this fog was moving wrong. I noticed it first in the way it flowed across my hood. Fog should drift, should move with air currents in soft, random patterns. This fog moved with purpose. It rolled across my car in waves, thick tendrils that seemed to probe at my windows, at my doors, like fingers testing for a way in. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was just fog, just water vapor and cold air. but my hands tightened on the wheel anyway, and I felt my breath getting shallower. The temperature inside my car started dropping. I had the heater running full blast, but I watched the thermometer on my dashboard fall from 70 degrees to 60 to 50 to 40. My breath fogged in front of my face. I cranked the heat higher, but it didn't help. The cold was seeping in from everywhere, from the windows, from the vents, from the floor. It was the kind of cold that comes from deep winter, not from a foggy October morning. I could see frost forming on the inside of my windows, delicate crystal patterns spreading across the glass like something was drawing on it from outside. That's when I heard the breathing. Not my breathing. Something else. A deep, slow inhale and exhale that seemed to surround the car. I held my breath, listening. There it was again, that rhythmic sound like lungs the size of the rooms filling and emptying. The fog pressed closer, and I realized it was time to that breathing. It pushed against my windows. When something inhaled, pulled back slightly when it exhaled. My rational mind tried to explain it away. Wind, engine sounds, my own pulse pounding in my ears. But I knew what I was hearing. Something in that fog was breathing. I tried to speed up, to push through it and get to clearer air, but the fog thickened until I couldn't see past my hood. I was driving blind, one hand on the wheel, one hand pressed against the window, feeling the glass vibrate with each massive breath. Then I saw the handprints. They appeared on my windshield, on my driver's side window, pressed against the glass from the outside. Not small hands. Huge hands with fingers that spread too wide, with palms that left condensation patterns that looked almost human, but not quite. I watched them appear, one after another, sliding down the glass like something was walking around my car, touching it, learning its shape. I should have stopped, should have put the car in park and waited, but every instinct I had screamed at me to keep moving, to not let whatever was out there catch up. I pressed the accelerator, felt my tires slip on pavement that had gone slick with moisture. The fog entered my car through the vents, thick streams of it pouring from the dashboard, from the air conditioning, from every opening. It smelled wrong. Not like clean mountain air, but like old earth and deep water, and something else, something organic and rotten. I started coughing, my eyes watering, my lungs burning. The whispers started when the fog filled the interior of my car. Dozens of voices, maybe hundreds, all speaking at once in a language I didn't know, but somehow understood on a level deeper than words. They wanted me to stop. They wanted me to open the door. They wanted me to step outside and join them in that endless gray nothing. I shook my head, kept driving, kept my foot on the gas even though I couldn't see anything anymore. My car was a bubble of metal moving through something vast and hungry and patient. I don't remember deciding to stop. One moment I was driving, the next I was pulling over onto what I hoped was the shoulder. My hands moved without my permission, killing the engine, reaching for the door handle. The fog pressed against every window now, so thick it looked like gray concrete. The handprints were everywhere, overlapping, dozens of them, all different sizes. And faces. I could see faces in the fog, pushing against the glass, mouths open, eyes hollow. They looked like they'd been there a long time, trapped in that mist, waiting for someone else to join them. I grabbed my phone. No signal, of course. The screen showed 5:47 a.m., but that couldn't be right. I'd only been driving for maybe 40 minutes. The clock in my car showed the same time. Outside, it should have been getting lighter, the first hints of dawn breaking through. But through the fog, I couldn't tell if it was night or day, or some third thing that existed outside normal time. I tried to restart the engine. Nothing. The battery was dead, or the fog had gotten into the engine, or something else I didn't want to think about. The breathing got louder, closer. I could feel it through the car now, vibrations that shook the frame, that rattled my windows in their frames. One of the windows cracked, a thin line spreading across the glass like a spider web. Then another crack, another. The fog was forcing its way in, and I knew that when it did, when it finally got inside completely, I would step out of the car. I I would walk into it willingly. Some part of me already wanted to. Some part of me that was tired of fighting, tired of being afraid, tired of being alone in the darkness before dawn. I must have blacked out. The next thing I remember is warmth on my face. Sunlight. Real sunlight. Not the filtered gray, nothing of the fog. I opened my eyes, and I was still in my car, still on the parkway, but parked in a scenic overlook I didn't remember pulling into. The fog was gone. The morning was clear and bright and absolutely normal. Tourists were parked in other spots taking photos, drinking coffee from thermoses. My camera was in the passenger seat right where I'd left it. My engine started on the first try. I drove straight back to Asheville, returned my rental car, and caught the first flight home. I didn't take a single photo that day, but when I got home and checked my camera, there was one image on it that I didn't take. A photo of my car, shot from outside, from maybe 20 feet away. The angle was wrong, too high to be ground level, like something had been hovering in the air. And in the driver's seat, visible through the windshield, was me. But my eyes were closed, my mouth was open, and my hands were reaching for the door handle. The timestamp said 5:47 a.m. The location data placed it on the Blue Ridge Parkway, at an overlook that doesn't exist on any map. I sold all my camera equipment a week later. I don't chase light anymore. I don't drive mountain roads before dawn. And when fog rolls in, thick and heavy and moving like it's alive, I close my windows, lock my doors, and wait for it to pass. Because now I know what's out there in the gray, and I know how close I came to joining it. Would you keep driving if you realized the ocean was rising faster than physically possible, and the road behind you was already underwater? I sell coastal properties for a living, million-dollar homes with ocean views, cliffside estates, beachfront cottages that go for prices most people will never see in their lifetime. I know Highway 1 like I know my own address, every scenic pullout, every tight curve, every stretch where the road clings to the mountainside with nothing but air and rocks between you and the Pacific. That afternoon in March, I just finished showing a property near Big Sur to a couple from San Jose. $4 million for a house that hung over the ocean like it was trying to fly. They loved it, said they'd put in an offer by the end of the week. I was in a good mood, already calculating my commission as I headed south toward my next appointment in San Simeon. The weather forecast had called for clear skies, typical California spring weather. 70 degrees, light breeze, perfect visibility. But as I rounded one of those hairpin turns that make tourists white-knuckle their steering wheels, I noticed the ocean looked strange. The water was closer to the road than it should have been. Highway 1 runs high along the cliffs in this section, a good 100 feet or more above sea level in places. The waves shouldn't have been visible at road level, but I could see whitecaps, could see spray hitting rocks that should have been way below my line of sight. I slowed down, checked my phone. No tsunami warnings, no alerts at all. Just my calendar reminding me I had 30 minutes to make a 40-minute drive. I kept going, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The ocean was getting louder. I could hear it over my engine, over the radio playing soft rock that I'd stopped paying attention to. The crash and roar of waves, that deep bass rumble that you feel in your chest when you're standing at the waterline. Except I wasn't at the waterline. I was driving on a highway that engineers had blasted into solid rock that had been here since the 1930s, that was supposed to be permanent. I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw something that made my foot slam on the brakes. Water. On the road behind me. Not a little puddle from a broken pipe or drainage overflow. A sheet of water, gray-green and churning, covering both lanes, flowing uphill. I didn't think. I accelerated hard, my tires squealing, my car lurching forward as I pushed it faster than was safe on these curves. In my mirror, the water kept coming, kept rising, impossibly fast. It wasn't flowing like normal water. It was climbing, surging up the mountain, like it had intention, like it wanted to catch me. The tide forecast that morning had shown low tide at 2 p.m. It was barely past 1. The water should have been going out, not coming in, and definitely not rising to swallow a highway that sat 100 feet above normal high tide. Other cars started appearing. Ahead of me, going the same direction, all of them driving too fast. I saw a minivan take a curve so wide it nearly scraped the mountain wall on the inside. A motorcycle passed me doing at least 90, the rider's head constantly turning to look back at what was chasing us. Because that's what it felt like. Not a natural tide, not a freak wave or storm surge. Something chasing us, hunting us, cutting off our escape routes one by one. I tried to pull up my GPS to find an inland road, any turnoff, that would take me away from the coast, but this section of Highway 1 doesn't have escapes. It's just you and the cliff and the ocean for miles and miles, with maybe a fire road or two that lead nowhere. The water reached the curves behind me. I watched it in my mirror, watched it fill the road like someone was pouring it from an enormous bucket. Where the highway should have been, there was just ocean, rolling and dark and rising. The guardrails disappeared. The shoulder disappeared. Sections of road I'd driven over just minutes before were completely submerged, as if they'd never existed. My phone started buzzing. Emergency alert. Coastal evacuation. Move to higher ground immediately. I almost laughed. I was on higher ground. I was on a highway that ran along mountaintops. There was no higher ground unless I abandoned my car and started climbing straight up the rock face. The motorcycle ahead of me took a curve too fast. I saw it happen in slow motion, saw the rider lean too far, saw the bike slip and slide and hit the guardrail. But there was no time to stop, no time to help. The water was too close, and if I stopped, it would catch me. I had to keep moving, had to keep the accelerator down, had to outrun an ocean that was breaking every law of physics I'd ever learned. The bike and rider went over the edge, but instead of falling into empty air and water far below, they hit the surface immediately. The ocean had risen to meet the road. It was right there, right below me, maybe 10 feet down instead of 100. My GPS showed that the road ahead was clear, except it wasn't. My eyes showed me water where the map showed asphalt. I came around a curve and had to brake hard as a wall of ocean spray exploded across my windshield. Waves were crashing over the road now, not from below but from the side, as if the ocean had tilted, as if gravity had stopped working properly. My car hydroplaned through 6 inches of water that shouldn't have been there. Salt spray coated my windows. I could taste it, smell it, that sharp brine smell of deep ocean water, not the pleasant beach scent, but something older, something from the lightless depths. I realized I was screaming. Not words, just sound, just noise to fill the space in my head where rational thought used to be. The car in front of me, a sedan with Arizona plates and a family visible through the rear window, started to slow down. I saw the brake lights, saw the car settle as it lost speed. I wanted to honk, to warn them, to tell them that stopping was death. But before I could, a wave hit them from the side. A wave that came from above the road somehow, from the mountainside instead of the ocean side. The sedan lifted, tilted, and was gone, pulled sideways into water that had appeared from nowhere. My car was next. I felt the pull, felt the ocean trying to drag me off the road. Water was pouring over my hood now, cascading like a waterfall, except falling upward, defying everything that should be possible. The steering wheel jerked in my hands. My tires lost traction. I was floating, drifting, and below me, impossibly, was nothing but ocean. The road was gone. The cliff was gone. I was suspended in water that bubbled and churned around my car, and I could see down through the windshield into depths that went on forever. Things moving down there, shapes that were too large, too wrong, too purposeful to be fish or whales or anything that should exist. My lungs burned. I realized I'd been holding my breath, as if I was already underwater, as if my car had already been pulled down into that impossible depth. The water outside my windows was getting darker, greener, full of sediment, and things I didn't want to identify. I could feel pressure building against the doors, against the glass, the weight of an entire ocean trying to get in. My ears popped. My chest felt compressed. The dashboard showed I was still on Highway 1, still at elevation, still on dry land. But my body knew different. I closed my eyes. Maybe that was surrender. Maybe it was just the only thing left to do when reality stops making sense. I felt the car tip forward, felt gravity reassert itself in the worst possible way. Falling. I was falling into water that was somehow both boiling hot and freezing cold at the same time. The impact, when I hit, never came. I fell and fell and fell, and the falling was worse than hitting would have been. When I opened my eyes, I was parked in a pullout near Cambria, 20 miles south of where I'd been. My car was dry. The ocean was where it should be, far below the highway, calm and blue and normal. Other cars were parked nearby, tourists taking photos of the view, completely oblivious. My phone showed 3 missed calls from my next appointment, wondering where I was. It was almost 4 p.m. I'd lost 3 hours. I got out on shaking legs and walked to the guardrail. Down below, the waves rolled in with their normal rhythm, covering and uncovering rocks in the eternal pattern of tides. But I saw something that made my stomach drop. Scattered among those rocks were pieces of cars, a motorcycle frame, twisted and covered in barnacles, the roof of a sedan, Arizona plates still visible, and dozens of others, wrecked and rusted and looking like they'd been underwater for years, not hours. I never showed another coastal property. I moved my real estate business inland to the valley, where the only water comes from, irrigation and rain. But sometimes at night I dream I'm still driving Highway 1, still running from an ocean that rises like a living thing. And in those dreams, I never make it to Cambria. In those dreams, I'm still falling, still waiting for the impact that never comes, trapped forever in that moment between the road and the water, where physics breaks and the ocean decides who stays and who drowns. Have you ever seen your own car driving toward you on an empty road and watched yourself wave from behind the wheel? I play guitar in a folk band that nobody's heard of. We do the circuit of small venues, college bars, coffee shops that let you set up in the corner and play for tips. It's not glamorous, but it pays enough to keep me on the road, and I love it. That night in November, we'd played a bar in Hays, Kansas. Decent crowd, good energy, made about $200 after we split it 3 ways. My bandmates were heading back to Wichita on I-70, the fast route, but I decided to take the scenic way. Well, scenic is generous, more like the quiet way. The back roads through farm country where you can drive for 30 miles without seeing another soul. I loaded my gear into my car around 1:30 in the morning, a 2015 Honda Civic, silver, with a dent in the rear bumper from where I'd backed into a post 2 years ago. Nothing special, but it was mine. And I knew every rattle, every squeak, every way the steering pulled slightly left if you weren't paying attention. The November air was cold and sharp, that particular prairie cold that cuts through your jacket and makes your breath fog. I cranked the heat, pulled up my GPS, and headed south on a county road whose name was just a number. County Road 140, or maybe 240. They all blur together out here, these perfectly straight roads that cut through endless fields in a rigid grid pattern. Kansas at night in late fall is a specific kind of empty. The harvest is done, the fields are bare stubble, and there's nothing between you and the horizon but flat earth and bigger sky. The moon was nearly full that night, bright enough that I could see the landscape even beyond my headlights. Fence posts marching into the distance. The occasional farmhouse, dark except for a porch light. Grain silos rising like monuments to something I didn't quite understand. I had music playing, my own band's demo that we'd recorded last month. Listening to it critically, picking apart my guitar work, thinking about what I'd do differently next time. I'd been driving for maybe 20 minutes when I saw headlights ahead, just two small points of light in the distance, coming toward me on the same road. Not unusual. Even out here, you'd occasionally meet another car. But as the lights got closer, something about them felt familiar. The height of them, the spacing, the slight asymmetry because the left one was a little dimmer than the right, something I'd been meaning to fix for months but kept forgetting. The car approached, and I felt my hands tighten on the wheel. It was a silver Honda Civic. Same model, same year, same dent in the rear bumper that I could see as it got closer. My car. I was looking at my own car driving toward me, and I knew that was impossible. Knew I was tired and seeing things, but I couldn't look away. We were maybe 100 yards apart now, both traveling at 40 miles per hour, closing, fast. I could see the driver through the windshield. I could see myself. I jerked the wheel right, pulling onto the shoulder, my tires spitting gravel. The other car didn't swerve. It kept coming, stayed in its lane, past me going the opposite direction. I caught a glimpse through the driver's window as it went by. My face, my jacket. My hand raised off the steering wheel in a small wave, the same casual gesture I'd give to another driver on a lonely road. Then it was past, taillights receding in my rearview mirror, two red points getting smaller and smaller until they disappeared completely. I sat there on the shoulder, engine idling, hands shaking. A hallucination. Had to be. Fatigue maybe from too many late nights and early mornings, or carbon monoxide leaking into the car, or just my brain misfiring after 3 beers and 4 hours of playing in a smoke-filled bar. I laughed, a short, nervous sound that didn't convince even me. I checked my mirror, checked the road ahead and behind. Empty. Just me and the night and miles of nothing. I pulled back onto the road and kept driving, but I couldn't shake the image. My own face looking back at me. That wave. That casual, friendly wave, like it was the most natural thing in the world to meet yourself on a Kansas back road at 2 a.m. I turned off my music. The silence that filled the car felt too heavy, too present. I could hear my breathing, could hear the whisper of tires on asphalt, could hear my heart beating faster than it should. The road stretched ahead, perfectly straight, disappearing into a vanishing point that seemed impossibly far away. These county roads are like that in Kansas, ruler straight for miles, following the old survey grid that divided everything into neat squares. I crested a small rise, one of the few variations in the relentlessly flat landscape, and saw headlights again. Same configuration, same asymmetry, same car coming toward me from the direction I was heading. This time I didn't pull over. I slowed down, but I stayed in my lane. The other car approached, and it was definitely mine, definitely me driving it. Same everything. As we got closer, I could see more details. The steering wheel was in the same position. The seat was adjusted the same way. Even the coffee cup in the holder was identical to the one I'd bought at the gas station before leaving Hayes. We passed each other at maybe 20 miles per hour, close enough that I could look directly into the other car's interior. The other me looked back, made eye contact, smiled. Not a friendly smile. Something else. Something knowing. I hit the brakes as soon as we'd passed, stopped completely in the middle of the road, grabbed my phone to call someone, anyone, to tell them what was happening. No signal. Of course, no signal. These rural Kansas roads are notorious for dead zones, places where cell towers don't reach and GPS gets sketchy. I checked my rear view. The other car hadn't stopped. Its taillights were disappearing into the distance behind me, heading back toward Hayes, toward the bar where I'd played, toward my past. I started driving again because sitting still felt worse than moving. At least moving gave me the illusion of control, of progress, of getting somewhere. But 5 minutes later, I saw them again. The headlights, my car coming toward me for the 3rd time. This time when we passed, the other me was closer to the window, face nearly pressed against the glass, staring at me with an intensity that made my stomach turn. And the wave was different. Not casual anymore, urgent, beckoning, Come here. Follow me. Turn around. I didn't turn around. I accelerated, pushed my car up to 60, then 70, too fast for these narrow county roads, where a deer or a piece of farm equipment could appear at any moment. The landscape blurred past, fence posts and fields, and the occasional dark house. My GPS had stopped working entirely, the screen frozen on a map that didn't match where I was. The roads should have been a perfect grid, easy to navigate even without GPS, but somehow I'd gotten turned around. Nothing looked familiar. The moon that had been on my right was now on my left, and I didn't remember turning. The fourth time I saw my car, it wasn't coming toward me. It was parked on the shoulder ahead, passenger side, facing the road. I could see the driver's door was open. I could see someone standing beside it. Me, standing there, waiting. I slowed down, instinct overriding fear, that human compulsion to help someone stopped on a lonely road. As I got closer, I could see my own expression. Desperate, pleading. The other me was waving both arms now, flagging me down, trying to get me to stop. I drove past, looked straight ahead, didn't let myself look in the mirror. My hands were locked on the wheel, knuckles white, and I was whispering something under my breath. Song lyrics. My own song lyrics, from the demo I'd been listening to earlier. Words about getting lost and finding home, and the long roads between the two. They felt like a prayer, like the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. The fifth time was different. The other car wasn't coming toward me or parked waiting. It was beside me, driving parallel, keeping pace exactly. I looked over and saw myself looking back. We were maybe 6 feet apart, two cars on a single-lane road that somehow held us both. The other me was mouthing something, words I couldn't hear through the closed windows. I looked forward. The road ahead forked, split into two identical roads that both curved away into darkness. I'd never seen the road fork before. Kansas backroads don't fork like that. They meet at right angles, or they don't meet at all. The other car moved closer, drifting toward me, and I felt the impact before I saw it. Not a collision, exactly. More like a merging, the two cars occupying the same space. And for a moment, I could see through. Myself, through the other me, could see that the inside of the other car was wrong. Empty. Not empty of things, but empty of substance. A hollow shell of metal and glass with nothing inside, nothing driving it, nothing but a shape I'd projected onto the void. Then I was past the fork, or through it, or somewhere else entirely. The road was straight again, single lane, no other cars. My phone buzzed, signal restored. Text messages flooding in from my bandmates, asking if I'd made it home okay. I checked the time, 6:30 in the morning. I'd been driving for 5 hours. A drive that should have taken 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours, at the leisurely pace I'd planned. I pulled over at the next town I saw, a tiny place with one stoplight and a gas station. The attendant looked at me strange when I went inside, asked if I was okay. I checked the bathroom mirror. I looked like myself. I felt like myself, but something was different, something subtle. The part in my hair was on the wrong side. The scar on my left hand that I'd gotten from a broken guitar string was on my right hand instead. Small things, things I might not have noticed if I hadn't been looking. I made it back to Wichita eventually, returned to my apartment, to my routine, to band practice and gigs and the normal flow of life. But sometimes I catch myself in mirrors and windows, and I have to check, have to make sure the reflection moves exactly when I move, exactly how I move. Because I remember that wave, that casual, friendly wave from the first time I saw my car coming toward me. And I wonder if the me that drove home that morning was the same me that left Hayes, or if somewhere on those dark Kansas backroads, something switched. If I'm the original, or the copy, or something else entirely, something that learned to pass, that learned to wave at the right moments and play guitar and smile like everything is normal. The band doesn't notice anything different. My friends say I'm fine, but I know what I saw. I know there's another version of me out there, or there was, or maybe now there isn't because now I'm here, and the other one is somewhere else, driving those eternal straight roads through empty fields, looking for something it lost or something it never had to begin with. Have you ever entered a tunnel that should take 2 minutes to drive through and found yourself still inside after 20? I document abandoned places for my YouTube channel, old hospitals, forgotten theme parks, ghost towns, that time left behind. It's not a big channel, maybe 15,000 subscribers, but it pays enough to fund my trips, and I genuinely love the work. There's something honest about decay, about seeing what happens when humans build something and then walk away from it. The abandoned section of the Pennsylvania Turnpike had been on my list for years. 9 miles of highway closed since 1968, including 2 tunnels that cut straight through the mountains. Thousands of people explore it every year, hikers and bikers and photographers. It's not dangerous. It's not secret. It's just forgotten infrastructure slowly returning to nature. I went in October on a Tuesday afternoon, figuring I'd have the place mostly to myself. Weekends bring crowds, but weekdays are quiet. I parked at the eastern access point, loaded my camera bag, checked my phone battery. Full charge, spare batteries in my pack, flashlight with fresh batteries. I'm careful about these things. I've been doing this for 5 years, and I've never had a situation I couldn't handle. The tunnel entrance loomed ahead, a dark semicircle cut into the mountain. The Rays Hill Tunnel, 3,732 feet long, according to my research. Less than a mile, an easy walk through. Filmed some footage of the graffiti-covered walls, the crumbling ceiling, the way light behaves in these spaces. 20 minutes, maybe 30 if I took my time. The temperature dropped the moment I stepped inside. That's normal for tunnels. They hold the cold like caves, stay chilly even in summer. But this felt more extreme than it should have for October. I could see my breath fogging in my flashlight beam. The tunnel stretched ahead, perfectly straight, the far end visible as a small circle of daylight. I started filming, narrating for my future video, talking about the history, how this section was bypassed when they widened the turnpike, how it's become this weird time capsule of 1960s infrastructure. My voice echoed in ways that sounded wrong. Not the normal reverb you'd expect in a concrete tube, but something more complex. My words bouncing back at odd intervals, overlapping, creating harmonies that shouldn't have been possible. I stopped talking, just walked and filmed. The graffiti on the walls was extensive. Layers and layers of spray paint and markers. Names and dates going back decades. I noticed one that said, "Turn back," in dripping red letters. Typical. Every abandoned place has warnings like that, usually left by kids trying to scare the next person through. I'd been walking for about 10 minutes when I checked behind me. The entrance I'd come through should still have been visible, a circle of daylight shrinking but present. It wasn't there, just darkness. The same darkness ahead of me. I turned my flashlight back the way I'd come. Nothing but tunnel, stretching endlessly in both directions. I told myself it was an optical illusion, a trick of the light and the curve of the tunnel, except the tunnel was straight. No curves, just a line through the mountain. The circle of daylight ahead hadn't gotten any larger. I'd been walking toward it for 10 minutes at a steady pace, should have covered at least half the distance by now, but the exit looked exactly as far away as when I'd started. I walked faster, my footsteps echoing in that strange, overlapping way. The temperature was still dropping. My fingers were getting numb, despite my gloves. I could see frost forming on the walls, delicate crystalline patterns spreading across the concrete and over the graffiti like the tunnel was trying to erase the evidence that people had ever been here. I passed a section of wall where someone had painted a mileage marker. 0.5 miles to exit. I kept walking, counting my steps, trying to calculate distance. I passed another marker. 0.5 miles to exit. Same message, same handwriting, same exact spot, or what felt like the same spot. The graffiti around it was identical, down to the small tag in the corner that said Rick 2004. I took a photo of it, forced myself to keep moving, past another marker, 0.5 miles to exit. Again. And again. My phone showed I'd been in the tunnel for 40 minutes. That was impossible. I should have walked through it twice by now at my pace. I tried to call someone, anyone. No signal. Expected in a tunnel, but my phone also showed something wrong with the time. It kept jumping. 3:47 p.m., then 3:52, then back to 3:47. The seconds ticking normally, but the minutes unstable, like the phone couldn't decide what time it actually was. I started seeing other people's abandoned equipment. A bicycle lying on its side, tires flat, frame rusted like it had been there for years. A backpack, contents spilled. Everything covered in that same frost. A camera, newer model than mine, lens shattered. I picked it up, tried to turn it on. Dead battery. But when I checked the last photo on the memory card using my own equipment, I saw a date. 2 weeks ago. And the photo showed this tunnel, this exact spot, the same endless perspective of concrete and darkness. Other cars appeared along the walls, pushed to the sides, abandoned. Not old cars from the 1960s when the tunnel closed, but recent models. A Honda with a 2023 registration sticker. A Toyota with GPS still mounted to the dashboard. Doors unlocked, keys still in the ignition. I tried one. The engine turned over but wouldn't start. Just made that grinding sound of a starter motor with no fuel or spark. The gas gauge showed empty, even though I could smell gasoline, could see the tank was intact. The air was getting thicker, harder to breathe. Not from lack of oxygen, but from something else. Pressure, maybe, like being underwater. My ears popped constantly. My head started to ache. The circle of daylight ahead was still exactly the same size, exactly the same distance away, mocking me with its promise of escape. I'd been walking for over an hour now. The tunnel should have ended a dozen times over. I tried running, sprinting toward that distant light, my camera gear banging against my back, my breath coming in ragged gasps that echoed and multiplied until it sounded like a crowd of people running with me. But the exit didn't get closer. My legs burned, my lungs screamed, and that circle of daylight remained fixed in the distance like a star. When I stopped, doubled over and gasping, I heard something else. Footsteps, not my echoes. Someone else, coming from behind me, from that direction that should have led back to the entrance. I turned my flashlight and saw a figure walking toward me. Same pace I'd been using, same camera bag, same jacket. It was me. Another me, walking through the tunnel like I had been, filming like I had been, probably seeing the same impossible distance that I was seeing. I opened my mouth to shout, to warn myself, to ask what was happening. But before I could make a sound, I passed another mileage marker, 0.5 miles to exit. And standing next to it was another me, and another beyond that, and another. A line of myself stretching back into the darkness, all of us trapped at different points in the same walk. All of us believing we were moving forward while staying perfectly, impossibly still. I don't remember deciding to lie down. I don't remember the cold finally becoming too much, or my phone dying, or my flashlight batteries running out. But I remember the darkness, complete and total, and the sound of footsteps. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All of us walking through the same tunnel. All of us trying to reach the same exit. All of us frozen in that moment of reaching, never arriving. They found my car 3 days later at the access point. They found my equipment scattered inside the tunnel, about 200 feet from the entrance. My camera was still recording. 6 hours of footage, all of it showing the same thing. Me walking in place, taking step after step while the camera stayed perfectly level, the background never changing, the circle of daylight ahead never getting closer or further away. And in the final frame, just before the battery died, dozens of figures visible in the darkness behind me. All of them wearing my jacket. All of them carrying my camera bag. all of them trying to leave a tunnel that never ends. What would you do if you started driving across a bridge and halfway through, you couldn't remember what was on either side? I work nights at St. Mary's Hospital in Morgan City. 3 12-hour shifts a week, 11 p.m. to 11 a.m., emergency room nursing. It's exhausting work, but I'm good at it. And the pay differential for overnight shifts helps with the bills. My regular commute takes 40 minutes, mostly on Highway 90. But there's a shortcut I take sometimes, when I'm running late or just too tired to deal with traffic lights. An old bridge over one of the smaller bayous, narrow 2-lane steel structure that the parish keeps saying they'll replace, but never does. The locals still use it. Saves about 15 minutes if you know where you're going. That night in August, I left the hospital at 11:15. A rough shift, 2 trauma cases, and a cardiac arrest that we'd worked for an hour before calling it. I was running on adrenaline and coffee, and that particular exhaustion that comes from watching someone die despite everything you do to save them. I just wanted to get home, take a shower, and sleep until my alarm went off at 9 p.m. for the next shift. The bridge was the obvious choice. Faster, emptier, no chance of getting stuck behind some tourist doing 30 in a 45. I turned onto the access road just after 11:30. The bridge appeared in my headlights, exactly as it always did. Steel girders painted rust red, deck surface that was supposedly asphalt, but felt more like patchwork, metal railings on both sides that looked sturdy enough, but probably hadn't been tested in decades. The bayou water below was dark and still, reflecting nothing. I'd crossed this bridge hundreds of times. I could do it half asleep, which was good, because that's basically what I was. The transition onto the bridge was smooth, that familiar thump of tires moving from regular road onto the slightly elevated deck. I settled into the center of the lane, hands relaxed on the wheel. The bridge was maybe a quarter mile long, took about 30 seconds to cross at normal speed. I'd be on the other side before I knew it. Then just 10 more minutes of backroads to my house. Except I wasn't reaching the other side. I kept driving, kept my speed steady at 40 miles per hour, but the far end of the bridge wasn't getting closer. I could see it, that transition point where the bridge met solid ground again, but it stayed exactly the same distance away. Like looking at the horizon. I checked my odometer. It was moving, showing I was traveling, but the bridge stretched ahead unchanged. I looked in my rear view mirror to see how far I'd come from the entrance. I couldn't see it. Just more bridge, extending back into darkness. That didn't make sense. The bridge was a quarter mile. I should be able to see both ends from the middle, but I couldn't see either end anymore. Just bridge, in both directions, steel and asphalt, and those rust-red railings, disappearing into night. The surface under my tires started changing. I felt it more than saw it. The smooth, rough texture of old asphalt became something else. Wooden planks, the kind of decking they used on really old bridges, each one making a distinct sound as my tires rolled over it. Thunk, 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 rhythmic and hollow. When had they replaced the deck? Why would they use wood? I looked down through my side window, trying to see the surface, and realized I couldn't remember what I was driving on. Had it always been wood? Or had it been something else before? I tried to remember where the bridge led. I was crossing from the hospital to... where? My house. Except I couldn't quite picture the road on the other side. Couldn't picture the turn I usually took, or the landmarks, or what town I was even heading toward. Morgan City, that's where I worked. But where did I live? The information was there, somewhere in my head, but I couldn't access it. Like trying to remember a dream 5 minutes after waking up. You know you had it, but the details are smoke. The bridge was swaying now. Not dramatically, but enough that I could feel it through the steering wheel, through the seat. A gentle side-to-side motion, like the bridge was breathing. Bridges do move, I told myself. They're designed to flex, to handle wind and weight. But there was no wind. The air was dead still. That thick August stillness that presses down on Louisiana like a wet blanket. and my car was the only weight on the bridge. I hadn't seen another vehicle since I'd turned onto the access road. 20 minutes. I'd been driving for 20 minutes according to my dashboard clock, but I was still on the bridge, still seeing that same expanse of steel and deck surface stretching away in both directions. My gas gauge showed a quarter tank, which was fine, more than enough to get home. Except 5 minutes later, it showed an eighth. Then almost empty. I was burning fuel, but going nowhere, trapped in this middle distance where nothing changed and time stopped making sense. The railings were different. I noticed it peripherally, didn't want to look directly because some part of me knew that if I looked too close, if I confirmed what I was seeing, it would become real in a way I couldn't handle. The rust-red steel railings were now iron. Black iron with decorative scrollwork, the kind you see on bridges from the 1800s. When had that changed? Had they always been iron? I couldn't remember. Couldn't remember what the railings looked like when I'd driven onto the bridge. The water below was rising. I could hear it now, a rushing sound that shouldn't have been there in a still bayou. I looked over the side, through the gap between road and railing, and saw water much closer than it should have been. The bridge deck was maybe 30 feet above the water line normally, high enough to let small boats pass underneath. But the water was maybe 10 feet below me now, and rising, dark and churning and moving way too fast. I pressed the accelerator harder, pushed my speed up to 50, then 60. The bridge blurred past, but the ends never got closer. I was moving but stationary, running in place, trapped in a geography that refused to resolve. The deck changed again, became metal grating, the kind where you can see straight through to the water below. My tires hummed on it, a different pitch than wood, than asphalt. How many surfaces had I driven over? How many times had the bridge changed while I wasn't looking? My phone rang. I grabbed it without thinking, desperate for contact, for confirmation that there was a world beyond this bridge. It was the hospital, a number I recognized. I answered, heard static, heard something underneath the static that might have been a voice saying my name. Then the call dropped. When I looked at my phone, it showed no recent calls, no missed calls, like the conversation had never happened. I couldn't remember my name. I knew I was a nurse. I knew I worked nights. But my actual name, the word people called me, was gone. I looked at my driver's license in the wallet on the passenger seat. Saw a photo that looked like me but somehow wasn't quite right. Saw a name I didn't recognize. Maria Castellanos. Was that me? Had it always been me? The address on the license was somewhere in New Iberia, but I'd never lived there. Or had I? The bridge deck ended. No warning, no transition, just suddenly there was no road ahead. My car's momentum carried me forward, front tires leaving the surface, and I had just enough time to see that the deck had literally stopped mid-span, broken off into empty air. I slammed the brakes, but physics doesn't care. I was falling, car and all, dropping toward water that was impossibly close and impossibly far away at the same time. The impact when I hit was wrong. The water was freezing cold and boiling hot simultaneously, burning and numbing, and I was sinking fast even though the car should have floated for at least a few seconds. Water poured in through vents, through door seams, through impossible gaps. I tried the door handle, locked. Tried the window button, nothing. The water filled the car in seconds, and I was underwater, drowning in a bayou that was somehow ocean deep. I woke up gasping in my car in the hospital parking lot, the same spot I'd parked before my shift. The dashboard clock showed 11:15 p.m. My shift was just ending, or just starting. I couldn't remember if I'd worked tonight or if I was about to. My scrubs were dry. My coffee cup was full and still hot. My phone showed a text from my supervisor asking if I was coming in, but I'd already worked. I'd finished my shift, left, taken the bridge. I got out of the car on shaking legs and walked back into the hospital. Checked the schedule board. I wasn't on for tonight. My next shift was in 2 days. I asked the nurse at the desk what day it was. She looked at me funny, told me it was the same night I remembered leaving. Except I hadn't left yet. Or I had. And somehow I'd come back, and none of it had happened. I drove home the long way that night. Highway 90, all the traffic lights, 40 minutes of normal roads with normal landmarks that I could name and recognize. I never took the bridge shortcut again, but sometimes I dream about it. About that endless span of steel and wood and iron. About the water rising and the deck changing and the horrible realization that I couldn't remember where I was going or where I'd come from. And in those dreams, I'm still driving, still halfway across, still waiting to reach an end that never comes. A month later, I drove past the access road during daylight, curious despite myself. I looked for the bridge. There was no bridge, just an old road that ended at the bayou's edge, blocked by a concrete barrier, and a sign that said, "Bridge condemned, closed since 1983. But my car's GPS still shows it as a valid route, still calculates it as the fastest way home. And every time I drive past that access road at night, I see headlights on it. Other cars, other drivers, turning onto a bridge that doesn't exist, crossing a span that never ends, heading toward destinations they'll spend forever trying to remember. Would you trust your memory if you got caught in a whiteout so complete that when it cleared, the landscape had changed and your tire tracks led somewhere else? I study wildlife migration patterns in the Rocky Mountains. Specifically, I track elk populations for Colorado Parks and Wildlife, which means spending a lot of time alone in very remote places, checking camera traps and collecting data from research stations. It's solitary work, but I prefer it that way. Animals make more sense to me than people. Their behaviors follow predictable patterns, cause and effect. Stimulus and response, no hidden agendas, no complications. Just survival and adaptation. That morning in late February, I was heading up to Station 7, one of our highest elevation monitoring sites at just over 11,000 feet. The forecast had called for clear skies, temperatures in the low 20s, minimal wind, perfect conditions for the 4-hour round trip. I loaded my truck with equipment, emergency supplies, the usual gear I carry when I'm going into the backcountry alone. Satellite phone, GPS unit, extra batteries, first aid kit, emergency blanket, enough food and water for 2 days, even though I'd be back by early afternoon. I'm careful. I've been doing this for 8 years. I know the mountains, know what they're capable of, know better than to take them lightly. The Forest Service road up to Station 7 is technically closed in winter, but we have permission to use it for research purposes. It's narrow, unpaved, steep in sections, with drop-offs on one side that fall away into ravines filled with pine trees and rocks. Not dangerous if you're paying attention and have 4-wheel drive, which I did. I'd driven this road maybe 50 times. I knew every switchback, every washout, every spot where the road narrowed to barely wider than my truck. The drive up took about 90 minutes at the cautious pace winter conditions required. I reached Station 7 around 10:30, parked in the small clearing we'd carved out years ago, and started my work. Swapping out memory cards from the trail cameras, checking battery levels, downloading data from the weather station, making notes about snow depth and animal tracks in the area. Standard procedure. I was focused, efficient, in my element. The work took about 45 minutes. By 11:15, I was done, equipment packed, ready to head back down. That's when the snow started. Not gradually, the way snow usually begins, with a few flakes drifting down. This was instant. One moment the sky was clear and blue, the next it was white, completely white. Snow so thick and heavy that visibility dropped to maybe 3 feet. I'd never seen anything like it. Mountain weather can change fast, but this was different. This was wrong. I stood there for a moment, trying to understand what I was seeing. The snow wasn't falling normally. Some of it was moving upward, rising instead of descending, swirling in patterns that defied gravity. I got in my truck, started the engine, turned on the heater full blast. The smart thing to do was wait it out. Let the squall pass, then head down when I could see. I had supplies. I had shelter. I had time. No need to panic. But when I checked my GPS, the coordinates were wrong. Not by a little. By miles. The unit showed me as being 15 miles east of where I actually was, in a location I knew was solid forest with no roads. I reset it. Same reading. Tried my backup GPS on my phone. Different coordinates, but equally wrong. Neither device showed me anywhere near Station 7. The temperature inside the truck started dropping despite the heater running. I could see my breath, watched frost spread across the inside of the windshield in crystalline patterns that looked almost like writing. Like symbols in a language I should have understood but didn't. The snow outside was getting worse, if that was possible. It wasn't just falling and rising anymore. It was moving horizontally, circling the truck in a vortex that blocked out everything beyond it. I was in a bubble of white spinning slowly, and I had no idea which direction was which. I tried the satellite phone. Static. Nothing but white noise that matched the white outside, like the snow had gotten into the electronics somehow. My truck's compass was spinning, rotating continuously, unable to find north. The thermometer showed the outside temperature at -40, which was impossible. It had been 23 degrees when I'd arrived. That kind of temperature drop doesn't happen in an hour. Doesn't happen at all, not in February in Colorado, not at this elevation. I put the truck in gear, decided I had to try moving, had to try getting down the mountain before the road became completely impassable. I couldn't see the road, couldn't see anything but white, but I knew the general direction, knew I needed to go downhill, knew if I was careful I could feel my way down. I rolled forward slowly, hands tight on the wheel, trying to sense the road surface through the tires. The truck lurched, dropped, and I hit the brakes hard. I'd driven off the road, front wheels in empty air. I reversed, turned, tried another direction. Same thing, cliff edge. I tried a third direction, another drop-off. That didn't make sense. The clearing where I'd parked was flat, surrounded by trees on 3 sides and road on the 4th. There were no cliff edges, but I was surrounded by them now, trapped in a shrinking island of solid ground with nothing but voids on every side. I got out of the truck, needed to see, needed to understand. The cold hit me like a physical force, so intense it burned. The snow stuck to my face, my exposed skin, and where it touched me it felt hot, like embers instead of ice. I could hear something in the wind, breathing, massive inhalations and exhalations that came from everywhere and nowhere, like the storm itself had lungs. My footprints behind me were already filled with snow, erased in seconds, but there were other prints, large ones, human-shaped but wrong. The stride was too long, 7 or 8 feet between steps, and they were fresh, pressed deep into the snow, leading away from my truck into the whiteout. I followed them without thinking, some instinct overriding sense, some need to know what was making those tracks. The snow cleared slightly ahead of me, just enough to see maybe 10 feet instead of 3. The footprints continued, and beside them now were drag marks, like something heavy being pulled. I turned back toward my truck. It wasn't there. I'd walked maybe 20 yards in a straight line, but when I looked back, there was nothing. Just more white, more snow, more of that breathing wind that seemed to be getting louder. I tried to retrace my steps, but my prints were gone, and the large footprints had vanished too. I was standing in unmarked snow, in a whiteout so complete I couldn't tell if I was on level ground, or a slope, or about to step off the edge of the world. The cold was inside me now, deeper than clothes, deeper than skin. My core temperature was dropping. I could feel it. That dangerous creeping numbness that signals hypothermia. I tried jumping, moving, generating heat, but my muscles weren't responding right. Too slow, too heavy. I fell to my knees in the snow, and it wasn't cold anymore. It was warm, comfortable. I lay down, closed my eyes, and dreamed of walking through endless white with something massive walking behind me, matching my pace, its breath hot on my neck. They found me 2 days later in a parking area 40 miles from Station 7 on a highway I'd never driven. I was in my truck with the engine running, heater on, parked perfectly in a designated spot. My body temperature was 89 degrees, severe hypothermia, but I was alive. The rescue team said I was lucky. Said I must have gotten disoriented in a sudden storm, made it down somehow on autopilot. But my truck had a full tank of gas when they found me. I'd filled up that morning and used a quarter tank getting to Station 7. The math didn't work. The cameras at Station 7 showed me arriving, working, getting back in my truck. Then the footage skipped, jumped forward 6 hours, and showed my truck still parked there but covered in snow. Then it was gone. Where I'd been for those 6 hours, where I'd driven, how I'd ended up 40 miles away with more gas than I should have had, nobody could explain. The GPS logs from my truck were corrupted, just showed me in the same spot for 2 days straight, even though that spot was empty. My footprints were found 3 months later, when the snow melted. They led from Station 7 into the forest, but the stride was all wrong. 7.5 feet between steps, pressed deep like I'd been carrying hundreds of extra pounds. They continued for miles into terrain my truck couldn't have accessed, up a slope too steep for vehicles, ending at a cliff face where there should have been no way forward. Beyond that point, there were no more prints. Just the rock wall and empty air, and a long drop into a canyon I'd studied on maps, but never visited. I don't work in the field anymore. Desk job now, data analysis, safe inside where the temperature's controlled, and the snow can't reach me. But sometimes I dream about that white space, about walking forever, through a storm that breathes, following footprints that might be mine, or might belong to something that learned to walk like me. And when I wake up, I check my stride, measure the distance between my steps, make sure it's still human-sized, still normal, still proof that whatever walked out of that whiteout and into my life was really me, and not something else wearing my face and driving my truck down a mountain I don't remember descending. How long would you keep driving if the road ahead kept getting softer, and you realized you were sinking into something that wasn't water? I run a small contracting business, mostly residential repair work in the South Carolina Lowcountry, fixing roofs, patching drywall, replacing water-damaged floors. It's honest work that keeps me busy, especially after hurricane season when everyone needs something fixed. That Tuesday in April, I got a call about a job on Edisto Island, a remote property that had sustained damage from winter storms. The owner was offering good money, cash payment, and I needed the work. GPS gave me a route that included a narrow causeway through the marsh, one of those old roads built decades ago when they just filled in sections of wetland without much concern for environmental impact. I loaded my truck with tools and materials around 2 in the afternoon. The drive from my place near Walterboro should have taken about 45 minutes, most of it on decent roads, before transitioning to the smaller routes that thread through the Ace Basin, where the rivers meet and everything turns to marsh. The weather was typical for April, warm and humid with that heavy low-country air that makes everything feel slower, thicker. I had my windows down, radio playing, thinking about the job ahead and whether I could finish it in one day or if it would require a return trip. The causeway appeared exactly where the GPS said it would, a narrow strip of asphalt cutting straight through miles of salt marsh. On both sides, Spartina grass stretched to the horizon, that distinctive olive-green color punctuated by tidal creeks and mud flats. I'd driven roads like this before. They're common in the Lowcountry, remnants of old infrastructure that connected islands and remote properties before better roads were built. This one looked maintained enough, no visible potholes or washouts, just a simple 2-lane road raised maybe 3 feet above the marsh on either side. About a mile in, I noticed the road surface changing. It started as a subtle shift in texture, the firm asphalt feeling slightly softer under my tires. Not enough to worry about, just different. Like the difference between new pavement and old sun-softened asphalt. But it kept getting softer. I could feel my truck settling lower, the tires pressing deeper into the road surface with each rotation. I slowed down, thinking maybe there was recent repair work, fresh tar that hadn't fully set. The road ahead looked normal, solid, but under my wheels it felt wrong. Standing water appeared on the road surface, even though it hadn't rained in 3 days. Just small puddles at first, collecting in depressions, reflecting the afternoon sky. But they were growing, spreading, and the water was dark. Not the clean rainwater you'd expect, but murky brown water that looked like it was seeping up from below rather than collecting from above. I checked my mirrors. The road behind me looked dry, normal. The road ahead was developing more puddles, larger ones, connecting into sheets of water that covered both lanes. My truck's front end dipped suddenly, tires breaking through what looked like solid asphalt into something underneath. Something soft and yielding that sucked at my wheels. I hit the gas, felt the engine rev, but forward momentum was sluggish. I was driving through mud, or something like mud, even though the road surface appeared intact. It was as if the asphalt was just a thin shell over marsh muck, and I was breaking through with every yard I traveled. The smell hit me next. Sulfur and rot and organic decay, that distinctive marsh smell magnified 100 times. It poured through my open windows, so thick I could taste it, making my eyes water. I rolled the windows up fast, turned on the air conditioning, but the smell was inside the cab now, coating everything. The water on the road was ankle deep, then shin deep, rising impossibly fast. I was driving through it, engine straining, water spraying up around my fenders like I was fording a creek. Except this was supposed to be a road, elevated above the marsh, dry land. Marsh lights appeared in the grass on both sides of the causeway. Small glowing orbs, dozens of them, blue-white and phosphorescent. They moved in patterns that looked purposeful, clustering and dispersing, drawing closer to the road. I'd heard about marsh lights before, swamp gas or some natural phenomenon that old-timers told stories about. But these felt different. They felt aware. They tracked with my truck as I passed, keeping pace, and where they touched the water on the road, the water bubbled and steamed. My truck settled lower. The water was at my door now, pressing against the seal, and I realized with cold certainty that I was sinking. Not just driving through water, but actually sinking into the road itself, being pulled down into the marsh beneath. I slammed the accelerator to the floor. The engine roared, but the truck barely moved forward, wheels spinning in thick mud that shouldn't have existed under the asphalt. I tried opening my door, thinking maybe I could get out, wade back to solid ground. But the door wouldn't budge. Water pressure from outside held it shut, or maybe mud, or maybe something else. Through the window, I could see the marsh grass getting closer, see the water level rising past my door handle, past my window frame. My truck was being swallowed, pulled down into marsh that was somehow both solid ground and deep water at the same time. The steering wheel jerked in my hands, not from tires hitting something, but from below, like something had grabbed the undercarriage and was pulling downward with incredible force. The truck tilted forward, nose dipping toward the water. My tools in the truck bed shifted, crashed forward against the cab. The marsh lights gathered closer, pressed against my windows, and in their glow I could see things in the water, shapes that might have been logs or might have been something else, long and curved and moving with intention. I tried my phone. No signal, of course. These marsh roads are notorious dead zones, places where cell towers don't reach and help is miles away. The GPS had frozen, showing me in the middle of the marsh, but not on any road like the causeway didn't exist on the map. I was marooned in geography that official records denied, sinking into earth that was supposed to be stable but was proving anything but. The truck lurched downward another foot. Water reached my side mirrors, crept up toward my door window. It wasn't cold like I expected. It was warm, almost body temperature, and thick like syrup. I could see sediment swirling in it, and things that moved under their own power, things that weren't fish or crabs or any marsh creature I recognized. The marsh lights were inside my cab now somehow, passing through glass like it wasn't there, circling, leaving traces of phosphorescence on my dashboard, my steering wheel, my hands. I don't remember the moment my truck went completely under. One second I was fighting to keep the nose up. The next I was submerged in darkness that pressed against every window, every surface. But I could still breathe. The cab was full of that thick marsh water. It was in my lungs, in my throat. But I was breathing it somehow, pulling oxygen from liquid that shouldn't have contained any. And I was still sinking, still being pulled down through layers of mud and sediment and history. Time stopped having meaning. I sank for what felt like hours, days, watching depth that shouldn't have existed in marsh that was supposed to be maybe 6 feet deep at high tide. I passed through strata that showed different eras, old causeway materials from previous roads, buried pilings from colonial-era bridges, wreckage of vehicles that had gone down before me, rusted frames and rotted upholstery and bones in the driver's seats. The impact when I hit bottom was gentle, soft. My truck settled onto a surface that felt solid but gave slightly under the weight, like landing on a waterbed. The marsh lights were everywhere down here, illuminating an underwater landscape that couldn't exist. Roads that led nowhere, arranged in neat grids below the marsh. An entire ghost infrastructure that had been built and then buried or swallowed or forgotten. They found my truck 3 days later in a marsh 20 miles from where I'd been driving. Not on a road, but in deep marsh, a location that maps showed as completely inaccessible by vehicle. The truck was upright, sitting on marsh muck, in water that was chest deep, engine cold, doors locked from the inside. My tools were scattered in a perfect circle 50 yards away on dry ground, arranged with geometric precision that made no sense, and I was gone. They found me 2 weeks after that, walking along Highway 17 near Charleston, 40 miles from my truck, wearing clean dry clothes I didn't own, and carrying a wallet that wasn't mine. I had no memory of the intervening time, no explanation for where I'd been or how I'd traveled that distance. The contractor who'd called about the Edisto Island job said he never called, said he didn't know my name, said the property I was supposed to repair didn't exist at the address I'd written down. I don't take jobs on the islands anymore. Don't drive causeways through the marsh. Don't trust roads that look solid but feel soft, that promise safe passage through places where earth and water have never quite decided which one should win. And sometimes at night, I dream I'm still sinking, still breathing marsh water, still watching depth markers count down into impossibility, while marsh lights circle and something vast and patient waits at the bottom of ground that looks shallow but goes down forever. Would you keep honking your horn if each honk echoed back, sounding more like a scream? I deliver packages for a living, not for the big companies with their branded trucks and uniforms, but for a smaller regional outfit that handles the routes nobody else wants. Remote areas, difficult access, places where GPS gives up and you navigate by landmarks and hope. The pay is decent because most drivers won't take these jobs. But I grew up in southern Utah, know these back roads, know how to read terrain and weather. A canyon road that would terrify someone from the city is just another Tuesday for me. That afternoon in September, I had a delivery to a research station deep in the canyon country east of Capitol Reef, some kind of geological monitoring equipment that needed to be there by end of business day. The route took me off the main highway onto progressively smaller roads until I was on what amounted to a shelf road, a narrow track carved into the canyon wall with maybe 10 feet of clearance and a drop-off that went down 300 feet to the canyon floor. Not the worst road I'd driven, but not pleasant either. One lane, occasional pullouts, and you just had to hope you didn't meet anyone coming the other way. The canyon walls rose on my right, sheer red sandstone stacked in layers that geologists probably had fancy names for. On my left, nothing but air and a long view down to scattered boulders and juniper trees that looked like toys from this height. The road surface was decent, graded dirt and gravel, but narrow enough that my mirrors almost brushed rock on the inside and hung over empty space on the outside. I kept my speed around 20, focused, hands steady on the wheel. This wasn't the kind of road where you could afford to zone out. About 15 minutes in, I came around a curve and saw rockfall ahead. Not a slide, just scattered rocks across the road, nothing I couldn't navigate around. But it meant slowing down even more, picking my route carefully. I laid on the horn as I approached. Standard practice in canyons to warn anyone who might be around the next blind curve. The sound echoed off the canyon walls, bouncing back and forth, that typical effect you get in tight spaces. Except the echo didn't sound quite right. My horn makes a standard truck horn noise, that aggressive mechanical blat. The echo that came back was similar but not identical. Slightly higher pitched, almost like it was coming from a different vehicle, or like the canyon walls had changed the sound in ways physics shouldn't allow. I shook it off, focused on the rocks, carefully threaded my truck through the clear spaces. Once past, I sped back up to 20 and continued deeper into the canyon. 10 minutes later, another rockfall. Bigger, this time, enough that I had to slow to maybe 5 miles per hour to pick through it. I hit the horn again, 3 short blasts. The echoes came back strange, stretched out, lasting way longer than they should have. And underneath the horn sounds, I heard something else. A grinding noise, metal on stone, like someone dragging a vehicle along the canyon wall. I stopped completely, rolled down my window, listened. The canyon was silent except for wind. No engines, no voices, no sounds of another vehicle. But the echoes were still going, still bouncing around the canyon walls even though I'd stopped honking at least 30 seconds ago. They were getting louder instead of fading, building on themselves. And they definitely didn't sound like my horn anymore. They sounded like screaming. Human voices screaming, dozens of them, coming from every direction at once, from the canyon walls, from the sky, from the depths below. I hit the gas, needed to get moving, needed to get through this section and into more open terrain. My tires spun on loose gravel, caught, launched me forward. The screaming echoes followed, kept pace, and I realized they were timed to my engine. Every time my RPMs increased, the screaming got louder. Every time I shifted gears, the pitch changed. The canyon was using my truck as an instrument, amplifying and distorting every sound I made into something that shouldn't exist. The road narrowed. I was down to maybe 8 feet of clearance now, barely wider than my truck. The cliff edge was right there, inches from my tires, and I couldn't afford to look at it. Couldn't afford to think about the drop. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, on the next curve, the next boulder, the next impossible section of shelf road that clung to the canyon wall like it was defying gravity through pure stubbornness. I saw movement in my peripheral vision, shadows on the canyon wall keeping pace with my truck. Not my shadow, not the normal play of light and geometry. These were separate, distinct, moving independently. Human-shaped shadows, dozens of them, running alongside me on the vertical rock face like the wall was their floor. I focused on the road, told myself it was just tricks of light, just my exhausted brain making patterns where none existed. The road ahead shimmered, heat waves maybe, or dust kicked up by wind, but the shimmer was localized, contained, and as I got closer, I could see it was more than distortion. The road surface was blurring, shifting, like I was looking at it through warped glass. I had no choice but to drive through it. Nowhere to turn around, no pullouts, just forward or backward, and backward would take hours I didn't have. The moment I entered the shimmer, sound changed. Everything became amplified. Every tiny noise magnified 1,000 times. My breathing was thunder. My heartbeat was an earthquake. The squeak of my steering wheel was nails on a chalkboard played through a stadium sound system. I wanted to cover my ears, but I needed both hands on the wheel, needed to keep driving through this acoustic nightmare, where every sound was weaponized. The echoes were inside my cab now, not coming from outside, but originating inside, bouncing off the interior surfaces of my truck. I heard voices speaking words I couldn't understand, words in languages that might not be human. I heard music that had rhythm but no melody, patterns that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. And underneath it all, I heard my own voice, my own horn, my own engine, but wrong, distorted, played backwards and forward simultaneously. Rock slide ahead, massive one, fresh, blocking most of the road. I slammed the brakes, truck skidding, rear end fishtailing toward the cliff edge. I corrected, overcorrected, felt my back tires leave the road surface for one impossible second before settling back onto gravel. The screaming echoes reached a crescendo, a wall of sound so intense it felt physical, pushing against my eardrums, vibrating through my bones. I couldn't go forward. The rock slide was too big, too unstable. I couldn't go backward, not on this narrow shelf with no room to turn around. I was trapped, and the sounds were getting worse, layering and building, creating harmonies that shouldn't be possible with echoes. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was inside my head now, inside my skull, reverberating through my brain tissue. I hit the horn, held it down, let it blare continuously, one long, unbroken note. If sound was what was happening, maybe more sound would cancel it out, would break whatever impossible acoustics the canyon had created. My horn screamed into the void, and the canyon screamed back. But this time the echo was exact. Perfect mirror. My sound and its return merged into one continuous tone that seemed to exist everywhere and nowhere. Time slipped. I don't know how long I sat there, hand on the horn, sound filling everything. Could have been seconds or hours. But when I came back to myself, the rock slide was gone. Not cleared, just gone. The road ahead was empty, graded dirt and gravel with no sign of obstruction. The shadows on the canyon wall were gone. The shimmer was gone. Everything was normal except for the silence. Complete silence. My engine was running, but I couldn't hear it. My tires crunched gravel, but made no sound. I tried the horn, watched my hand press the button, but heard nothing. The canyon had taken my sound, absorbed it, left me in a pocket of absolute quiet that was somehow worse than the chaos had been. I drove the rest of the route in that silence, delivered my package to confused researchers who spoke words I saw but couldn't hear, drove back out through the canyon, through spaces where sound should have been but wasn't. It wasn't until I reached the highway, until I was back on pavement with other traffic, that hearing returned. All at once, like someone had unmuted the world. But something stayed wrong. Sounds don't echo right anymore for me. My voice in a bathroom comes back in someone else's tone. My footsteps in a hallway return with extra beats like someone's walking behind me. Car, horns, and traffic sound like screaming if I'm not careful to ignore them. And sometimes, late at night, I hear the echoes from that canyon, still bouncing around inside my skull, still building on themselves, still creating impossible harmonies from sounds that should have faded years ago. I quit the delivery job, work in a warehouse now, indoors, surrounded by soft materials that absorb sound instead of reflecting it. But I can't escape the memory of that canyon road where echoes became something alive, where sound turned predatory, where the walls learned to scream back in voices that weren't quite human and weren't quite anything else either. What would you do if your headlights lit up soldiers marching across the road and you could smell gunpowder and hear drums even with your windows closed? I teach American history at a high school in Roanoke. 15 years of explaining the Civil War to teenagers who think it happened 1,000 years ago instead of 160. That weekend in October, I'd attended a teaching conference in Richmond. 3 days of workshops about making history engaging, about connecting students to the past. Ironic, considering what happened on my drive home. I left Richmond around 8 p.m., later than I'd planned, but the conference ran long and I'd stayed for the closing reception. The drive back to Roanoke would take about 3 hours on Interstate 64, then north on 81. Easy drive, mostly highway, nothing complicated, except I missed my exit. Simple mistake, not paying attention, lost in thoughts about lesson plans. By the time I realized it, I was on Route 11, the old north-south road that predates the interstate system. Not a problem. Route 11 runs parallel to the interstate through the Shenandoah Valley, just takes longer because it goes through towns instead of bypassing them. I'd driven it before during daylight, knew it was scenic, historic, the kind of road where every other mile marker has a Civil War historical sign. At night, though, Route 11 was different. Dark in a way that highways never are, with long stretches between towns where streetlights don't exist, and the only illumination comes from your headlights and the occasional farmhouse set back from the road. I settled in, turned on some music, accepted that I'd be home closer to midnight than 11. The road wound through countryside that looked flat, but was actually rolling hills, following terrain that armies had marched across during the Valley Campaign. The fog started around Staunton. Patches at first, wisps that drifted across the road and caught my headlights. Then thicker, concentrated in low-lying areas, the kind of ground fog that settles in valleys on cool October nights. Nothing unusual, just annoying because it cut visibility and made me slow down. What was unusual was the smell. Even with my windows up, even with the ventilation on recirculate, I could smell smoke. Not campfire smoke or house fire smoke, but something acrid and chemical, like gunpowder, like the smell from that one time I'd gone to a Civil War reenactment and stood too close when they fired the cannons. I passed a historical marker, one of those brown signs that Virginia puts up everywhere. Couldn't read what it said, driving too fast and the fog too thick. But I caught the shape of it, the familiar profile of those Civil War battlefield markers. There are dozens of them along Route 11, marking troop movements and skirmishes and places where history happened in concentrated bursts of violence. I'd probably passed that exact sign before, maybe even stopped to read it on some summer afternoon when I was collecting material for lessons. The radio started cutting out, music fading to static, then back to music, then gone entirely. I scanned through stations, found nothing but white noise punctuated by strange sounds. Voices, maybe, speaking too faintly to make out words. Rhythmic sounds that could have been music or could have been something else. I turned it off, drove in silence, broken only by my engine and tires on asphalt. That's when I saw them. Soldiers, walking across the road maybe 100 yards ahead, caught in my headlights. A column of them, maybe 20 or 30, moving from the east side of the road to the west in perfect formation. I hit the brakes, heart suddenly pounding, expecting them to scatter or stop or react somehow to a car bearing down on them. They didn't. They kept walking, same steady pace. And as I got closer, I could see details that didn't make sense. Their uniforms were wrong. Not modern military, not even modern reenactor costumes. These were authentic. Wool that looked heavy and dirty, kepis and slouch hats, rifles carried at shoulder arms, bedrolls and canteens, and all the equipment that Civil War infantry would have carried. Union soldiers, I realized, seeing the blue uniforms, the particular cut of the coats. My historian brain cataloged details even while my rational brain tried to process what I was seeing. I stopped completely about 20 feet from the column. They kept marching, crossing directly in front of my car, and they walked through my headlight beams like the light wasn't there. I could see them clearly, could see individual faces, beards, and young clean-shaven cheeks, and expressions of exhaustion so deep it looked like death. But they didn't react to my car, didn't react to the lights, just kept marching with mechanical precision. The column passed through my car, not around it. Through it. I watched soldiers walk through my hood, through my windshield, through my dashboard, and my steering wheel, and me. I felt them as they passed, felt the weight of their equipment, felt the cold that clung to them, felt something deeper and more wrong than just cold. Felt the exhaustion, the fear, the resignation, for just... The grid roads in northwestern Iowa are disorienting if you're not used to them. Perfect north-south and east-west lines, intersecting every mile, with nothing but cornfields in between. No landmarks, no hills, no curves to help you orient yourself. Just endless flat, punctuated by the occasional grain elevator rising like a lighthouse in an ocean of crops. I'd been driving for about 45 minutes when I realized I needed coffee. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple, and I was getting that late afternoon drowsiness that comes from a full day of paperwork and driving. The rest stop appeared exactly when I needed it, a small facility just off Highway 20. Not one of the big interstate rest areas with modern architecture and tourist information centers, but one of the older county-maintained stops. Single building, parking lot, picnic tables, the basics. I pulled in, grateful for the chance to stretch my legs and get some caffeine into my system. There were maybe half a dozen other vehicles in the lot. A couple of semis, a minivan, 2 sedans. Normal for this time of day on this stretch of road. The building was standard issue. Concrete block construction, vending machines visible through the windows, restrooms, a small lobby area with those metal benches that are designed to be uncomfortable enough that people don't loiter. I pushed through the door and headed straight for the coffee machine, feeding it dollar bills and waiting for the cup to fill with something that would technically qualify as coffee, even if it tasted like burnt cardboard. The woman at the sink looked up when I entered. Mid-50s, trucker by the look of her jacket and the way she carried herself. She stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Recognition, maybe. But I'd never seen her before. I nodded politely, grabbed my coffee, took a sip that confirmed my worst expectations about rest stop coffee quality. "You're back," she said. Not a question. A statement. I looked at her, confused. "Sorry. You've been here for 3 days." She said it matter-of-factly, like she was commenting on the weather. "Same clothes, same car, just sitting out there in the parking lot, coming in every few hours for coffee and bathroom breaks, then going back to your car." My stomach dropped. Some instinct told me this wasn't a joke, wasn't a case of mistaken identity. The certainty in her voice was too complete. "I just got here, 5 minutes ago. I was doing inspections up in Sheldon County, heading back to Des Moines." She dried her hands slowly, watching me with those same unreadable eyes. "Today's Friday. You got here Tuesday afternoon around 5:30. I remember because I was here Tuesday, pulled in right after you. Saw you again Wednesday morning, still here. Figured you were waiting for someone or having car trouble. But you're still here Thursday, still here Friday. Same routine, coffee, bathroom, back to your car, like you're stuck in a loop. Friday." She said Friday. But it was Tuesday, October 15th. I had 3 more inspections scheduled for Wednesday, a meeting with my supervisor Thursday morning. I checked my phone. The screen showed Friday, October 18th, 4:47 p.m. That couldn't be right. My phone had been working fine all day, showing Tuesday, showing the correct date. "That's impossible," I said. But my voice sounded weak, even to me. A man came out of the men's room, older guy in overalls. He saw me and stopped. "Still here, huh? Thought for sure you'd have figured it out by now and left." "Figured what out?" My coffee was shaking in my hand, liquid sloshing against the lid. "Whatever you need to figure out to leave." He washed his hands, taking his time. "This place, it holds people sometimes. Not everybody. Most folks come and go like normal. But every now and then, someone gets stuck, can't leave. Keeps coming back to the building, getting coffee, going back to their car. Days pass, but they don't notice. They think it's still the same day they arrived." The room felt smaller. The fluorescent lights buzzed too loud. I could smell my own sweat, sharp and fear-tinged. "That's insane. That doesn't happen. That's not possible." The woman shrugged. "Possible or not, you're here. Have been. I've watched you walk that same path from your car to this building maybe 30 times. Always look confused when you come in. Always defensive when someone tells you how long you've been here. Then you go back to your car and the loop starts over. I back toward the door. I'm leaving. Right now. I'm getting in my car and I'm leaving. You'll try, the old man said, not unkindly. But you'll end up back here. They always do, the ones who get stuck. Something about this place, something about this particular spot. It's like a fold in time. You drive away, think you're making progress, but somehow you end up back in this parking lot. Happens so smooth you don't even notice the transition. I ran to my car, fumbled with my keys, got the door open. My inspection logs were on the passenger seat. I grabbed them, looking for proof of the date. The last entry I'd made was dated October 15th, Tuesday, 4:15 p.m. Routine inspection of Morrison grain elevator. Everything in order. That was my last stop before heading home. That was an hour ago. Not 3 days ago, but my phone still showed Friday. I started the car, pulled out of the parking lot faster than was safe, tires squealing slightly on the asphalt. I headed east on Highway 20, watching the odometer, watching the mile markers pass. 1 mile, 2 miles, 5 miles. The landscape looked normal. Cornfields, farmhouses, the occasional intersection. My hands started to relax on the wheel. Whatever that was, whoever those people were, they were wrong or crazy or playing some elaborate prank. The rest stop appeared ahead on my right. Same building, same parking lot, same vehicles, including what looked like my car already parked there. I hit the brakes, pulled onto the shoulder, stared. I'd been driving east for 10 minutes. I should be 15 miles away by now, but there was the rest stop exactly as I'd left it. I checked my mirrors. The road behind me stretched empty. I checked my GPS. It showed me at the rest stop. Showed I'd never left. I tried again. Turned around, headed west this time. Drove for 20 minutes, pushing my speed up to 70. Watched the mile markers count down. Watched the sun drop lower toward the horizon. The rest stop appeared ahead. Same one. Same building. Same impossible location that shouldn't be here. Shouldn't be anywhere near me, but there it was. The third time I tried going north on a county road thinking maybe the highway was the problem. The fourth time I tried south. Every direction led back. Every attempt to escape the area resulted in the rest stop reappearing, sometimes ahead of me, sometimes behind, sometimes off to the side. But always there, always waiting, always exactly the same. By what my phone insisted was 9 p.m. Friday night, I gave up and pulled back into the parking lot. My original parking space was empty. The car I'd seen earlier that looked like mine was gone. I parked, turned off the engine, sat in darkness broken only by the rest stop's exterior lights. The trucker woman's semi was still there. The old man's pickup too. And others. How many others? How many people were trapped here, caught in whatever this was? I needed coffee, needed to think. I got out, walked to the building on legs that felt disconnected from my body. Inside, a different group of people. A young couple huddled together on a bench. A businessman in a suit that looked slept in. A teenager crying quietly in the corner. The trucker woman was gone. So was the old man. But I knew what these new people would tell me if I asked. They'd say I'd been here for days. They'd say I keep repeating the same actions. They'd say I'm stuck. My phone rang. I grabbed it, desperate for connection to the outside world. My supervisor's number. I answered, started to explain where I was, what was happening. He cut me off. Where the hell have you been? You missed Wednesday's inspections, missed Thursday's meeting. It's Friday afternoon and nobody's heard from you in 3 days. I'm about to file a missing persons report. I'm at a rest stop on Highway 20, I said. I'm stuck. I can't leave. Something's wrong with this place. Silence. Then, which rest stop? I'll send someone. I don't know. Just off Highway 20, somewhere between Sheldon County and Des Moines. There's no rest stop on Highway 20 between Sheldon County and Des Moines. Not anymore. They closed the old county facilities 5 years ago, tore most of them down. I walked to the window, looked out at the parking lot, at the building that was solid and real under my feet. at the lights in the vehicles and the very physical, very tangible evidence that this place existed. "It's here," I said. "I'm here. I'm standing in it." "Get to the interstate," my supervisor said. "Get to I-80, stop at the Adair rest area and call me from there. That's a real location. I can send help to a real location." I never made it to Adair. Every attempt led back here, to this parking lot, this building, this fold in space and time where October 15th bleeds into October 18th, without the days in between feeling like they happened. The other trapped people, and we've started comparing notes. Some have been here a week. One claims 2 months, though he's unclear on the details, time having lost coherence for him. They found my car eventually. Not here, but abandoned on a county road 30 miles north, out of gas, keys in the ignition. They never found me. I'm still here, or still there, or still in that moment between arriving and leaving that stretches infinitely. Still getting coffee, still trying to leave, still trapped in a rest stop that officially doesn't exist. On a road I drive but never travel, counting days that my watch shows passing, but my memory insists never happen. Have you ever driven past a cornfield and felt absolutely certain that the stalks were deliberately moving to block your view of something? I inspect seed quality for a major agricultural company. My job is to drive from farm to farm during harvest season, taking samples, checking moisture content, making sure the grain meets our standards before we buy it. It's tedious work, but harvest time in Iowa is when I make most of my annual income, so I put in the hours. Long days, 12-hour shifts, driving grid roads through endless cornfields from dawn until well after dark. That Friday in late October, I was finishing up my route in Buena Vista County, far northwestern Iowa, where the farms are massive and the towns are tiny. I'd sampled 15 farms that day, my truck bed full of tagged grain bags, my paperwork scattered across the passenger seat. The sun was setting behind me, casting long shadows across the stubble fields where the corn had already been harvested. But ahead of me, there was still standing corn, tall corn, maybe 8 feet high, way taller than it should have been this late in the season. Most farmers around here had their harvest done by mid-October. This field looked untouched, unharvested, the stalks still green and full like it was August instead of late fall. The road I was on cut straight through the field. Perfect north-south county road, corn on both sides pressing right up to the ditch line. I'd driven this exact road earlier in the week, and I was certain there'd been harvested fields here, empty stubble with combines working the far sections. But memory is unreliable, especially after 12 hours of driving identical roads through identical landscape. Maybe I was thinking of a different road, a different section. They all blur together out here, where every mile looks like the last. The corn started leaning over the road. Not dramatically, just a few stalks here and there bending inward, their tops hanging over the ditch and reaching toward the pavement. Then more stalks, then whole rows of them, creating a tunnel effect, a canopy of corn leaves and tassels that blocked out the fading sunlight. I slowed down, uneasy in a way I couldn't articulate. The corn was too close, too present, and the way it leaned, it didn't look natural. It looked purposeful, like the stalks were craning forward to see what was driving past. I noticed the scarecrows next. There were dozens of them, placed every 100 feet or so along both sides of the road. That wasn't unusual during harvest. Farmers sometimes put up scarecrows, though more for tradition than actual bird control these days. But these scarecrows were facing the road, all of them, turned toward the pavement instead of toward the fields they were supposed to be protecting. And they were detailed in a way scarecrows usually aren't. Actual clothes, not just burlap sacks. Actual features visible on their faces, even from a distance. They looked less like crude effigies and more like people standing very still. My truck started having trouble. The engine stuttered, power cutting in and out like it was starving for fuel even though I had half a tank. I tapped the gas pedal, got a surge of acceleration, then more stuttering. The electrical system flickered, dashboard lights dimming and brightening in a pattern that seemed almost rhythmic. I checked my mirrors. The road behind me looked normal, clear, open. But ahead, the corn tunnel was getting tighter, stalks bending further over the road, and I could swear they were moving even though there was no wind. The scarecrows were closer to the road than they'd been. I was certain of it. The one I was passing had been at least 10 feet back in the field when I first saw it. Now it was maybe 3 feet from the ditch. I watched it in my side mirror as I passed. It didn't move, but the next scarecrow ahead was definitely closer to the road than the last one had been, and the one after that was even closer. Like they were migrating toward the pavement, getting nearer with each iteration, though I never saw them actually move. The corn rows on either side of the road weren't parallel anymore. They'd been planted in the standard pattern, straight lines running perpendicular to the road. But now the rows were angling, curving, creating geometric patterns that pulled the eye inward toward some central point I couldn't see. I'm not artistic, don't know much about design, but I know crop patterns, and these weren't normal. These were intentional, deliberate, creating an optical effect that made me dizzy when I looked at them too long. My truck died completely, just shut off mid-drive, all power gone, momentum carrying me forward until friction and gravity brought me to a stop right in the middle of the road. I tried restarting. Nothing. Not even the clicking of a dead battery. Just absolute silence broken only by my own breathing and a rustling sound from the corn that was way too loud and way too organized to be wind. I got out because sitting in a dead vehicle in the middle of a road felt more dangerous than being on foot. The air smelled wrong. Not the clean smell of harvest. Not the dusty, sweet smell of dry corn. This was something else. Something organic and rotting underneath the expected agricultural sense. Like the field was decomposing, breaking down into something that corn shouldn't become. The scarecrows had moved. The ones I could see were all within arm's reach of the road now, lined up along both ditches like an audience. And their faces were too detailed. I could see expressions. Not the blank neutral faces of mannequins, but actual human expressions. Fear, mostly. Mouths open like they were screaming or trying to warn me. Eyes wide and following my movement. The corn was closing in. Stalks that had been bending over the road were now touching it, leaves dragging across the pavement. And they were moving actively now, swaying in coordinated waves that traveled down the rows toward me. I backed against my truck, watching the corn advance from both sides, watching the tunnel I'd driven through collapse behind me, sealing off any retreat. One of the scarecrows fell forward, just toppled over like its support had been removed, landing face first in the ditch. I heard the impact, heard something crack. When it rolled slightly, I saw it wasn't a scarecrow. It was a person. A body dressed in old clothes, stiff with rigor or time, face preserved somehow in the dry, cold air of autumn. And all along the road, other scarecrows were falling, revealing what they'd been all along. Not decorations, not effigies. People, bodies positioned in the field, dressed up, displayed like warnings, or trophies, or something worse. I ran. Didn't think, just ran down the road in the direction I'd been driving, leaving my truck and my samples and my paperwork behind. The corn grabbed at me, stalks wrapping around my arms, my legs, leaves cutting my face with edges sharp as paper. I pulled free, kept running, and the road under my feet felt wrong, too soft. I looked down and saw the pavement was changing, becoming dirt, becoming mud, becoming something that wasn't quite solid and wasn't quite liquid. The scarecrow bodies were standing up. I heard them behind me, heard the creak and snap of joints that shouldn't move, heard footsteps that should have been impossible. They were following me, walking in perfect synchronized rhythm, and when I risked a glance back, I saw a dozen of them, 24, more, all marching down the road in formation, like they'd been waiting years for something to chase. The corn opened ahead of me. The stalks parted, creating a clear path into the field itself, and I knew, with absolute certainty that if I followed that path, I'd never come back. But the road was gone, dissolved into mud that was up to my ankles now, pulling me down, and the bodies behind me were getting closer. I chose the path, chose the corn, ran into the field where the rows made those impossible geometric patterns, where the stalks grew so thick they blocked out the last light of day. I don't remember how long I ran. Time stopped having meaning in that corn maze that shouldn't have existed, following paths that curved back on themselves, but somehow never led to where I'd started. I remember finding other people, living people, or mostly living, farmers who'd come to check their fields and never left, drivers who'd taken a wrong turn, inspectors like me who'd made the mistake of stopping when they should have kept moving. They told me the field had been here for decades, longer maybe, that it moves, relocates, appears wherever it wants along the grid roads of northwestern Iowa, that it takes people and keeps them, adds them to its collection of scarecrows, uses them to lure in more, that the corn grows on something other than soil, feeds on something other than water and sun. I lived in that field for what felt like years, might have been days. Time didn't work right there. I found ways to survive, eating grain that tasted like ash, drinking moisture from the stalks that burned going down. I watched others give up, watched them let the field take them, watched them become scarecrows positioned along internal roads where no one but us would see them. They found me 3 weeks after I disappeared. I was walking along Highway 71, 40 miles from where my truck had been recovered. Clean clothes that weren't mine, no memory of the intervening time. My company fired me, said I'd abandoned equipment, breached contract, but they couldn't explain the corn silk in my hair, the leaf cuts on my skin that took months to heal, or the grain samples I'd somehow kept in my pockets that when tested showed DNA markers from no known corn variety. I don't work in agriculture anymore. Moved to the city where the only corn I see comes in cans at the grocery store. But sometimes I dream about those geometric patterns, about rows that curve and bend in ways that pull your eye toward something vast and patient at their center. And sometimes when I drive past any field, any empty agricultural land, I see a scarecrow that looks too human, positioned too deliberately, facing the road with an expression that might be warning or might be beckoning. And I know that somewhere in Iowa, on a grid road that looks like every other grid road, there's a field of corn that's still growing, still waiting, still collecting its harvest of people who made the mistake of stopping when they should have driven on. Would you pay a toll booth operator who demands something other than money when you can't see their face and your only other option is to turn back on a road that's no longer there? I drive for a rideshare company, nights mostly, because that's when the surge pricing kicks in and I can actually make decent money. 3 years of this work, thousands of rides, every kind of passenger you can imagine. Drunks and business travelers and college kids and people just trying to get home after their car broke down. I've seen it all, or I thought I had until that night in early November when I got a pickup request that changed everything. The request came through around 2:15 in the morning. Passenger named Marcus, pickup location in Newark, drop-off at an address in Fort Lee. Easy run, maybe 40 minutes. Good fare for a Tuesday night when things were usually slow. I accepted, navigated to the pickup point, found my passenger waiting outside a closed office building. Young guy, mid-20s, wearing a suit that looked expensive. He got in the back, confirmed his name, and we headed north. The app routed me onto a road I didn't recognize. Not unusual in New Jersey, where there are a dozen ways to get anywhere, and the app is always trying to optimize for traffic. But this route was strange. It showed a direct line from Newark to Fort Lee, cutting through areas I thought were residential or industrial, not major thoroughfares. I followed it anyway. The app hasn't steered me wrong yet, and passengers get annoyed if you deviate from the suggested route. The road materialized exactly where the GPS said it would be, A clean entrance ramp off a surface street that led onto what looked like a small highway. 2 lanes in each direction, good pavement, streetlights at regular intervals, but no other cars, not one. At 2:30 a.m. that wasn't necessarily weird, but something about the emptiness felt wrong, like the road existed in a pocket separate from the rest of the city. "You know where you're going?" Marcus asked from the back seat. First words he'd spoken since confirming his name. "Following the GPS," I said. "Should have you there in 35 minutes. He didn't respond. I glanced in the rearview mirror, saw him staring out the window, with an expression I couldn't read. Nervous, maybe, or just tired. Passengers are always tired at this hour. The toll plaza appeared ahead, lit up like a small stadium. But it was wrong. The design was old, maybe from the 1970s, with those manual toll booths instead of the modern automated lanes. I'd driven all over New Jersey, and I didn't know any plazas that still looked like this. Everything had been upgraded to EZ-Pass and automated systems years ago. I slowed as I approached, looking for the EZ-Pass lane. There wasn't one. Just 6 manual toll booths, all of them showing red lights except one. The green light beckoned me toward the far right lane. A figure was visible in the booth, silhouetted against interior, lighting. "Don't stop," Marcus said suddenly. "Keep driving. Go around it." "I have to pay the toll," I said, already committed to the lane, my car rolling up to the booth. "You don't understand. This road shouldn't exist. This toll plaza was torn down in 1987. You need to turn around right now." But there was nowhere to turn around. Concrete barriers channeled traffic toward the booths. I stopped at the window, already reaching for my wallet. The figure in the booth leaned forward into the light, and I saw that where their face should have been, there was just darkness. Not shadow. Not a mask. Just absence, like looking into a hole cut into reality. "Toll," the figure said. Voice like gravel scraping concrete, masculine but wrong in its modulation. "Payment required for passage." "How much?" I asked, mouth dry, hand frozen on my wallet. "Not money. Memory. Specific memory. Your happiest moment. The peak experience of your life that you would relive if you could." I laughed. It came out harsh and frightened. "That's not how tolls work. It's how this toll works. You crossed onto my road. You'll pay my price, or you'll stay here. The barrier behind you has already closed. Look." I checked my mirrors. A steel barrier had lowered across the road behind me, blocking any retreat. More barriers extended into the darkness on either side, creating a cage around my car. Marcus was silent in the back seat, and when I glanced at him again, his expression was pure terror. "I've been here before," he whispered. 3 years ago. I paid. I gave him what he wanted, and I've regretted it every day since. I tried taking other routes, tried never using rideshare apps again, but here I am. He wants more." The figure in the booth made a sound that might have been laughter. "The second toll is steeper. For you, Marcus, I'll take everything, every happy memory you have left. You'll remember only pain and fear and loss. Drive forward and pay, or sit here until you starve." "There has to be another option," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I'll pay cash. Whatever amount you want. Your currency has no value here. This road exists outside the jurisdiction of your government, your economy, your laws. Time moves differently here. People have sat at this booth for what feels like hours, only to find years have passed in the world beyond. Others have paid and driven through, reaching their destinations with gaps in their memory they can never explain." I looked at my phone. The rideshare app was frozen, timestamp stuck at 2:28 a.m. My clock on the dashboard showed 2:28. The second hand was ticking, but the minute never changed. Marcus was right. This place existed outside normal time. "What happens if I refuse to pay?" I asked. "You wait. Eventually everyone pays. Hunger, thirst, desperation. They break down and give me what I ask for. Or they die here, and I collect their memories anyway, from whatever remains. I started to reach for my door handle, thinking maybe I could run, could find a way around the barriers. The figure's hand shot through the window impossibly fast, impossibly long, fingers wrapping around my wrist. They were cold, not like ice, but like the complete absence of heat, like touching the void between stars. "Payment now or never," the figure said. "Choose." My happiest memory surfaced unbidden. My daughter's 3rd birthday just before the divorce, before everything fell apart. The way she'd laughed when she saw the cake I'd spent all morning making. The way she'd hugged me and said I was the best daddy ever. That moment was the pinnacle, the peak before the long decline. And this thing wanted to take it from me. Wanted to erase it so thoroughly that I'd never be able to recall the texture of that happiness. Never be able to hold on to it during the hard nights that came after. "No," I said. "You can't have it." The grip on my wrist tightened. "Then you stay. Your passenger stays. You'll sit here until your bodies fail and your minds break, and in the end, I'll take not just that memory, but everything. All of it. Every moment you've ever experienced will belong to me." Marcus was crying in the back seat. "Just pay it. Trust me. Living without a few good memories is better than what happens if you refuse." "How many times have you been here?" I asked him, not taking my eyes off the faceless figure. 4 times. He's taken everything. My wedding day, my son's birth, the day I got my dream job, the moment I forgave my father before he died. I'm hollow now. I go through the motions, but I don't remember why anything matters. And he keeps bringing me back for more. The figure laughed again. "Marcus understands the rules. The road claims certain people. They can fight, can try to avoid it, but eventually they end up here again. And each time, the toll increases. Some people I collect from for decades, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but a shell, walking around wondering why life feels so empty." I looked at the barrier ahead. It was down too, blocking the way forward. There was no escape, no way to win, unless I could crash through, but my sedan would crumple against those steel barriers. Unless I could somehow, my phone buzzed. Impossible, but it did. A notification from the rideshare company. Passenger cancellation. Marcus had canceled the ride, and the moment he did, his door unlocked automatically. He bolted from the car, running into the darkness beyond the toll plaza. The figure released my wrist and lunged after him, moving with speed that defied physics, that suggested this body was just a temporary form for something that existed in dimensions I couldn't perceive. In the moment they left, the barriers began to rise. I didn't think. I slammed the accelerator, my car lurching forward, passing under the rising barrier with inches to spare. The toll plaza fell away behind me, and suddenly I was on a normal road, the Garden State Parkway, with normal traffic and normal lights and the crushing relief of reality. I pulled over, shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. My phone showed 6:47 a.m. 4 hours had passed. The rideshare app showed the canceled ride, but no record of where I'd picked up Marcus or where I'd driven. Just a gap in my GPS history. And when I checked my bank account, expecting to see the fare, there was a withdrawal instead. Not money. Memory. I couldn't remember my daughter's 3rd birthday anymore. Could remember the facts of it. Could remember that I'd felt happy, but the actual experience was gone. Like trying to remember a dream after waking. The emotional resonance, the sensory details, all of it erased. They never found Marcus. I filed a police report about a missing passenger, but without any record of the pickup, or the route, or the toll plaza that doesn't exist on any map, they couldn't investigate. I stopped driving for rideshare after that, but the app still sends me requests sometimes. Always between 2 and 3 a.m., always pickups in Newark with drop-offs in Fort Lee, always passengers with names I don't recognize but faces that look haunted. And I know if I ever accept one of those rides, I'll end up back at that toll plaza, back at that booth, with less to offer than before and more to lose than I can afford. If you enjoyed these stories about the roads where drivers vanish, make sure to subscribe to Verified Souls and hit that notification bell. We explore the darkest corners of the unexplained, bringing you stories that will make you think twice before taking that shortcut home. Like this video, share it with someone who loves horror, and let us know in the comments which story unsettled you the most. Until next time, stay safe on the roads, and remember, not every route on your GPS leads where you think it does.